Hi, I'm Chelsea from Cognitive, and I'm sat here with Lucy today as part of our EmpowerHer series, where we'll be talking about everything DE&I. Right, well, thanks for joining us today, Lucy. Would you mind giving us a quick introduction to who you are and what you do at Oaka Studios?
Sure. So I am a director at Oaka Studio, and our mission is to support all business applications partners to grow a stronger relationship with Microsoft, build a more solid understanding of their sales and go-to-market messaging and their position in the market, and build a scalable team to support the delivery of their sales.
Amazing. And why are you partnering with us here at Cognitive?
For us, having a relationship with Cognitive means that we can guide our partners to build a stronger team. And we love what they're doing around DE&I and exposing some of the challenges and the opportunities that there are around creating more diversity in the workplace.
Yeah, love that. Okay. So in your career, have you encountered any situations where a male ally has advocated for you?
I have. I've had quite a few really good scenarios. So my first job in the industry was very much what I described to be my apprenticeship. I was there for a long time. It was a startup, scale-up business, and I wore 19 different hats in the same day. What was really fantastic about that was that I had the opportunity to learn what I was really good at and what I wasn't quite so good at. But what made it challenging to move on was that I wasn't sure particularly which role I should land into or how that would work in larger scale organizations. Then I got quite heavily involved in the business applications community, did a few public speaking events, went to a few community focused social events, and became really good friends with a guy called Chris Huntingford, who I'm sure many people will be familiar with. And he really advocated for me to land into a pre-sales role in a larger scale enterprise organization. And I think he taught me to quash imposter syndrome. He taught me to focus on what I knew I was good at. And really, ultimately supported me in getting not just that role, but further roles thereafter.
Yeah.
So I'll be always forever grateful for him. And then one other guy that has really been part of my career is a guy called Keith Watling. You may have heard of Keith. He's been in the Power Platform community for a long time. And he's come from a really interesting background. He was a bus driver. He moved into building analytical databases and platforms and apps for them, and then basically became a bit of a Microsoft celebrity. And I met him at that point, and there was a couple of scenarios where I'd really pushed myself out of my comfort zone technically in my role at the time, and he would stay up until 4 o'clock in the morning supporting me in building demos and positioning statements and helping me really architect a solution for my client that was going to be really powerful, completely outside of his day job, completely outside of anything that was going to benefit him. And it really supported my growth in that space. So yeah, I'll always be grateful for those two.
That's incredible. And how did that influence your experience in the tech workplace as well?
I think it really taught me that it's really important to focus heavily on building your network. There's a phrase that I often refer to, that your network is your net worth, and I will advocate for that all the way through. Really think it's important to ensure that you both support net new people into the industry or those that are looking to perhaps pivot in their career, but also accept the help from those that are prepared to give it. And those two scenarios really highlighted that to me, and I'll always try and pay back the favor, pay it forward for others as well in the space.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think that's what's so good about the biz apps community is, I know MVPs, they obviously need to do things, but actually everybody is out there to help each other, which I think is really nice anyway.
Yeah, it's so collaborative.
Yeah. And could you share an experience where you encountered negativity due to your gender?
I think there's a few. I'd love to say no, I have no scenarios where there's been any negativity. I think there's been a few scenarios where you have, perhaps during the hiring period or when you're early in a role, you've perhaps got the impression that maybe you were hired for your gender and not for your capability to deliver successfully on the role. Whether that's actually imposter syndrome speaking or, whether there's any truth behind it is another thing. But I do think there's been scenarios where that's felt like the case. Equally, I'm fortunate enough to have a 2-year-old son, and when I went through my pregnancy, I was very supported in that respect. I was very well supported in my maternity phase, but in my return to work, I struggled slightly. I wasn't anticipating struggling. I was desperate to get back to work. I was desperate to do something I knew I could do, And I felt like maybe I wasn't as good at parenting as I could have been. I was really looking forward to going back to work, but logistically wasn't able to do a full week. I wanted to. I really, really wanted to, and I wanted to get back to full time. But equally, I knew I was only having one son. It was post-COVID. Childminders, nurseries, childcare was in short supply, and I physically wasn't able to be at my desk 5 days a week, 40 hours a week, and some, at the bare minimum. And I did struggle to make the request to my employer at the time to have flexible working. They were pretty flexible in general, but there wasn't there was a perspective that it was going to have an impact on my career and my progression within the organisation. And that really bothered me at the time. I was granted flexible working in the end, which was great. But it did always feel like it was going to impact my manager negatively because he had been given a certain amount of budget to hire a certain number of heads for his team. Yeah. And I was accounting for a whole head, but I was only putting in 0.8 of the week.
Yeah. So
I understood his pressures, and I didn't particularly want to be the person that was causing him pressures, but equally I physically couldn't be at my desk any longer. Yeah. So that was probably my main challenge I've had in my career, solely down to being a woman.
Yeah. And I think so many people can resonate with that, in that return to work and feeling like they don't actually have the support around them. And I've heard like some stories about when someone needs to go and pick their child up from school and they get asked, well, why can't your wife go and do that? So that's on the flip side of it as well. But I think that's something that is quite pressing. I'm sorry that you went through that as well.
Yeah, I think hopefully over the long run it'll change, and there'll be more of a loose perspective towards gender roles and perhaps expectations on certain roles. Yeah. And I think there are already some really good scenarios of where organisations have implemented good procedures and methodologies for dealing with that. But I think at the time it wasn't something that I felt was dealt with in the right way.
And I think the whole working from home, remote working has made a huge difference and impact to mums being able to do the things they need to do and also do their day job.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's good. So looking retrospectively, is there anything the company could have done to make these challenges a bit better?
I think training is really important. I felt at the time the leadership and my direct manager perhaps hadn't been given the resources, the capability, perhaps even the targets or the support from his leadership to provide kind of really the foundational support that was needed. I think training is probably the key thing that I would focus on. We are seeing that in the organisations we're working with now. We have, around 30 partners we're engaged with, and there are loads of them that are implementing really cool policies. I heard of one recently around a menopause policy to support women who are going through that, which is just fantastic and is music to my ears. And I love hearing those stories because I feel like they're getting more and more common. So I think it's around arming the leadership, the management with the tools and the education to disseminate it to the rest of the organisation, which ultimately will create the culture of welcomeness, openness, well-being, diversity.
Yeah. Which is very present in following on from our lunch this afternoon.
Absolutely.
Have you been in a position to mentor or actively support another woman struggling in the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I was very fortunate in my time at Microsoft that they place a lot of focus on employee resource groups. And one of those resource groups was very much focused around the early career space. So individuals who'd not long spent time in their roles or in that particular part of their career. And we were given the capacity, the space to be able to mentor those individuals in experiences, which was great. It was kind of fairly fluid in terms of mentoring. But it was lovely to hear their experiences as well and how they perceived the culture of the organisation as someone who perhaps never experienced another organisation or were just completely new to the industry. So that was really nice.
Yeah.
Equally in my role now as director at Oaka, it's fantastic to have individuals join our team. We've got a really diverse, that's not a cheap plug, but we do actually have a really diverse team. And it's really lovely to see how not just the diversity in terms of gender, but the diversity in terms of background, skill set, ethnicity, and personality type is really creating a well-blended team.
Yeah.
We have some really passionate storytellers. We have some really passionate presenters. We have some incredibly analytical people. And whilst occasionally that can pose challenges because people tackle an opportunity or a piece of work differently. It also presents us with loads of different perspectives that help us to grow our organisation. And a big part of that is around learning from each other. So whilst it's not formal mentoring, we're very much a tight team that will support each other through challenges. And that's really nice to see.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
And then what recommendations would you give to other females in leadership positions?
Oh, I think that's a really good question. Firstly, I don't know whether there's enough females in leadership positions. We do see that, Microsoft did a great job. They've got some fantastic female leaders. I'm not sure whether other organisations have enough leadership, and I don't know what the problem is. And maybe it's how the job descriptions are handled. Maybe it's how the recruitment process is dealt with. It's not a reflection on you guys. Maybe it's how the current leadership team look into their network to hire to replace them and their succession plans. But I think my ultimate guidance to women in leadership positions is to have that kind of flexibility of mind. If it's about creating a more diverse team, then we need to be able to create an environment that attracts that diverse team, be it, as I say, personality types, ethnicity, gender, disability. We have to be able to make things as inclusive as possible. For example, we've implemented some basic technology that helps some of our team who struggle with dyslexia to be able to capture requirements in meetings, to be able to follow up, listening to recordings of sessions and interrogate transcripts of meetings, because they're unable to take notes at the time. It's not part, they struggle to do that. So by implementing some fairly simple, low-cost technology, we've been able to open up some roles to individuals who may not have applied.
Yeah.
Or even considered they could do it. Equally, I think female leaders should really look to try and create a culture of learning all within their organisation, provide a mechanism through which their teams, their managers, their individual contributors can feed back on things they're experiencing, techniques they're using to win a deal, land a project, implement a technology, and try and encourage proactive sharing of how those successful techniques have worked, really to try and drive that understanding that everybody approaches things differently, and irrespective of gender or ethnicity or diversity or whatever it may be, people approach things in different ways that others can benefit from. In practicality, what does that mean? I don't know. Open culture, open door, always make a space available for individuals to bring that feedback to their desk.
100%. I think as well, with it being like diverse and having different ways that people think, then an organisation just, it really can aid the company and the way they do things in loads of ways, like back to what we were speaking about earlier. Like the benefits of having a diverse team outweigh.
I'll happily pitch in on that. I think one of the exercises that we did at Microsoft, which I've always taken a lot of value from, is the Insights Discovery Workshop. Others use Myers-Briggs, others use other different methodologies to assess people's personality types. And in the team I was in at the time, one of the things that was really quite powerful about the output of that Insights Discovery was that one half of the team was very much one personality type, and one half of the team was very much the other. We were the antithesis of each other, which made for a great team, but it did also make some challenges around how we communicated with each other. And our leader at the time was very much an analytical person, and as a yellow fluffy storyteller, it was difficult for me to empathize completely as to what he wanted to hear. So once we'd done this personality insights discovery workshop, it gave me the empathy to understand what he wanted to hear, but equally it allowed him to understand my natural slant and the way I approach things, which is telling a narrative. Once we'd had the opportunity to understand how each other approached things, then we were more successful for each other, and we were able to help each other out a little bit more, which was great. So again, going back to the previous question, I think some of those simple approaches to understanding not just the background and the career and the history that someone's had, but also their personality type, really makes for a more cohesive, friction-free team.
Yeah, I do think every team should do the personality test, because I've done it before, and I think we're both saying we're yellows, but if I work with people that are blues and a lot of reds, I think you find a lot of, if people understand what I'm talking about, there's a lot of reds in recruitment. So understanding how people work and, you know, not to be offended by the way that they work or the way they come across, and appreciate it's like enthusiasm.
Yeah.
That helps everybody involved.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of women probably are more the blue and the yellows, for people to understand what that means.
I think
Would
so.
make for a happier work environment.
One of the things that really struck me the most about doing that workshop was there was a piece, it was like a 27-page report on your personality type. And I handed it to my partner and he read every single line because he's blue. He's analytical, right? I didn't read it. I went to the bottom and worked out what I was.
Yeah.
And at the bottom of that report, there was an assessment as to your personality type at work and in public and at home. And mine was exactly the same.
Oh, okay.
And the rest of my team were completely different at work and at home. So that kind of struck me as really interesting. Obviously, what you see is what you get. I can't help it. I don't know why. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting because it gave me that ability to think, oh, okay, well, they're like that at work. That's just their persona, the face they're putting on when they arrive at the office. But actually, under the surface, they might be slightly different.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, I love that. And then, have you witnessed or been involved in any real success stories where companies have implemented strategies to attract or retain women?
So one of the organisations that I absolutely adore and think are incredibly successful is an organisation called Noteworthy. They provide a service for assessing a Microsoft Partners Partner Centre, which for those of you that have had any interaction with Microsoft will know is the most incredibly challenging thing to do. So they have this incredible offer. It's really simple for partners to understand. It's really easily consumed. It's a really simple commercial model. And their CEO, Sian Harrington, has implemented a 4-day working week. She gives complete flexibility to her team to do the school run, pick up, whatever. And she basically has given them a space with which they can make decisions based on their own judgment and what they know they need to deliver in a working week. So I'm properly taking inspiration from Sian and learning loads from her. And I think she's a great example of where she's implemented some really simple but very effective strategies to attract and retain women.
Yeah, absolutely. And allow them to actually grow, progress.
Yeah.
No, that does sound really good.
Yeah.
4-day week sounds lovely.
Oh yeah, I'm all over the 4-day week.
And then, in your opinion, what are some effective ways that individuals, regardless of gender, can contribute to creating a more inclusive and supportive environment?
It's a good question. I think I'll refer back to really trying to have an understanding of the personality types within your team or the managers you look after or, you know, the environment that you're in. I think it's really important to have that understanding and it does make for a more cohesive environment.
People sometimes say there's not enough women who know tech, but what can tech companies do to entice and encourage women to join?
It's a fantastic question and one that I'm constantly trying to answer. I totally agree. I don't think there's enough women in tech. And I think there is a general consensus, opinion, feeling in the market that you have to be nerdy and you have to be hands-on keyboard, able to build an app, able to implement a migration, whatever it might be. Like I don't even know what the scenarios are. And I think what companies could do to attract a more diverse workplace is to better present the vast array of opportunities there are on the table. I mean, you know, whether it's sales, pre-sales, alliance, you know, none of these roles require technical capability necessarily. You know, maybe they benefit from some, but ultimately it's absolutely not the basic skill set that an individual in that role would need. So I think it's really important that we more publicly share skill sets specifically that would be beneficial to an individual in that kind of role.
Yeah.
In the space that is technology. I mean, ultimately, the technology space is incredibly profitable one to be in. You know, it's you have the opportunity to potentially accelerate your career, your salary, your earnings rapidly. Yeah. And actually experience from outside of the industry can be really valuable to a technical organisation. Take, for example, a sales or an industry-focused role. If you're working at a partner that has a focus on a specific sector, public sector or retail, whatever it might be, actually your skills as an individual that's coming from that industry are as valuable, if not more valuable, to the organisation than your technical capability.
Yeah.
So I think the more that organisations can do to position skills that aren't so technical and actually maybe are considered more softer skills, you know, their consulting ability, their capability to have a conversation with a C-suite leader in that space, would be one way of attracting more women, but also more diverse individuals into the industry, and debunking the myth that you don't have to be able to code, sit in a darkened room and build an app. You know, it's way more than that. It's about being able to position to a client or an individual or an end user the benefit of a solution to their organization, and often that means they're not technical.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And I think as well, like back to what we discussed earlier, in the sense of like job descriptions, that they're sometimes, it's more of like a wish list, and lots of women will need to check 9 out of 10 of the requirements to actually even apply. Whereas, it's not digging out men, but men will see that they can do a few and they're like, okay, brilliant, well, I can learn the less. But there is definitely a battle there. And I think people entering tech, it can be quite daunting as well to not fully understand what they're asking for. I think there needs to be more of a, if you don't know everything, like, we're a supportive employer and we'll train you up, and have more something like that.
I think getting the right pool of individuals interested in a job is probably one of the hardest things, because I think culturally and historically, technical organisations or organisations that are hiring into a technical role have done exactly that. They have listed very, very specific capabilities that they want, down to the name of the product, you know, down to the name of the solution within the product. Whereas actually, I think in order to attract the right pool of people, to be able to open up the minds of the hiring manager to slightly more diverse hires, people from different backgrounds with different skill sets, it comes down to writing that better job description. And for me, I think a big part of that is, what do you want that individual to achieve, as opposed to what are they physically going to be doing?
Yeah.
You know, we want you to achieve, you know, build confidence in our client base, or provide capability to our development team, whatever it may be. Rather than kind of listing out those specific capabilities, this is the feeling we want you to drive within our organisation, more OKRs rather than KPIs.
Yeah.
But I do think we've, as an industry, got stuck in a little bit of a rut as to how we write those job descriptions, you know, and give those job descriptions out, or those job titles out. You know, we all know as business applications practice leaders that we need a solution architect, a functional consultant, a technical consultant, a dev, a tester, or whatever. But actually, we need to be thinking more broadly than that, and what other skills can we layer over that can actually achieve the same goals that those traditional roles would be delivering.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming in today and sharing some insight. Like, here at Cognitive, this is something that we're really interested in trying to support, and with all of this valuable insight, we're able to put something that we can actually go to market with to make it more diverse and inclusive.
Thank you so much for having me.